for our next dish is we are doing a seared scallop. We're serving this with a Beurre Blanc, and we're topping it with a Gremolata. So really, Beurre Blanc is kind of the workhorse of the seafood restaurant business. And what it is it's basically a reduction, and you see the recipe, reducing, and then incorporating butter. And what reducing does is it just kind of intensifies the flavor, kind of burns off that bitter alcohol of the white wine. And with Beurre Blanc, you can really use any kind of flavors in it. Once you kind of have the base Beurre Blanc, and that's what we're preparing today. It's really just a base Beurre Blanc, but you can put spoons of basil pesto in it. You can put black bean ginger, the jarred black bean ginger sauce in it. You can do soy wasabi in it. Really, whatever you can think of adding to a Beurre Blanc, you can add. We do lots of, we do sun-dried tomatoes in the restaurant with fresh basil in it. So this is kind of the workhorse sauce, and we make hundreds of liters a week of this sauce. We literally make probably 10 liters a day of Beurre Blanc. With Beurre Blanc, it's a really finicky sauce to work with for the fact that it will separate on you if it gets too hot. So, once we do the reducing, we take it off the heat, you'll see that we will fold in the butter. Once you've made Beurre Blanc, you have to store it somewhere warm and then serve it right after. You can't pre-make it, put it in the fridge, and then bring it out later. So Beurre Blanc will separate if it's brought back up to a boil. Because you're really folding in butter, you're mounting it with butter, so once it gets hot again, that butter will separate and just float to the top. So it's really kind of important to make sure that you understand that it will break on you. So what we're going to do is we are going to place the white wine in this pot. About a cup of white wine. And I always tell people when you're cooking with wine, I'm not one of these chefs that tells you, if it's not high-end and good enough to drink, I wouldn't cook with it. I'm kind of the opposite, Buy a cheaper wine to cook with it. Save the expensive stuff for drinking. I usually buy actually wine in like kegs of wine, the 1.5 liter kegs of wine, and keep them in my cupboard because they stay in that pack, and I use those exclusively for cooking. So what we're going to do is add some shallots to this white wine. Now when you make Beurre Blanc, you also want to make sure that you have the right kind of pot. And what I mean by that is you want to have enough surface space that the Beurre Blanc is going to reduce properly. If you made it in this, you're never going to get a nice reduction. It's going to kind of burn on you and things like that. So you want to make sure that you have enough space that we have about 1.5 inches of white wine there, and then we're going to reduce it. And what reducing means is basically we're going to reduce it by half. So we started with a full cup, we're going to reduce it by half, and literally that's just boiling it away until about 1/2 cup remains. So put it on high heat. Keep an eye on it, but you don't need to be too overly concerned about it. So in the meantime, what we're going to do is we are going to, pass me one of those plates there. Maybe the silver platter. We're going to clean our scallops. Everybody can see in the mirror all right? So what I have here is I have a jumbo fresh East Coast scallop. Now when you're looking at scallops, they have this abductor muscle on it. There's nothing you can do about that but remove it. Trust me, all my apprentices have always asked me, oh, what if we did this? What if we did that? I don't care what you do with it, it'll never be palatable. It'll be so chewy. So remove this abductor muscle. And it's literally just a matter of, and sometimes you get lucky and they don't have it on there, it's literally just a matter of just peeling it off. Now scallops come in a count size. So usually it's 10/20s, U10s, 20/30s. And what that means is you have 20 to 30 scallops per pound, which means they're going to be quite small. 10 to 20 scallops per pound, which means they're going to be a little larger. And then you have what we call U10s, U6s, U8s, which means an under 10 count. So all scallops and prawns are done by counts. So a U10 means there's under 10 scallops per pound, which means you're starting to get some pretty large. These are U10s. Now, I would not spend the money on a U10 and turn it into my pasta dish. I would probably buy a cheaper, smaller scallop, maybe even a previously frozen one. Fresh scallops are not easy to come by. So again, These are great for searing because you have control over them. If you get these little tiny scallops and you try to sear them, forget it. You are better off poaching them in a cream sauce and tossing it with pasta. Now, because there was a few more students in the class than anticipated, I actually had to go and buy 2 more scallops, and she had no more of the larger ones left. So that's kind of what they look like when they're done. You know, buy them, put them in a container. You can seal it up with plastic wrap and leave it. Now, when you buy scallops, you don't want them in your fridge for more than, you know, a day or 2 days, because you don't know how long they've been frozen and thawed in the fish counter, and or how long they've been fresh in the fish counter. So just kind of keep that in mind. And they should smell sweet. When you're buying scallops, they should have a really sweet smell to them. They shouldn't smell like the ocean, like some people say. They should have a really nice, sweet smell to them. So our white wine is going. We're just gonna let that go. I wish this burner was a little bit hotter. And then we're going to get our other burners started here. Now, also when you're buying scallops, you can buy scallops sometimes like at Costco. They come frozen in a bag. I would not be hesitant to buy frozen scallops at Costco, because I'm going to tell you, probably 95% of the scallops that are on the market have been previously frozen. So if someone tells you, oh, the quality's not there or whatever, Costco has some pretty strict purchasing guidelines, so they actually do buy a really good quality product. And again, 95% of them have been previously frozen, so that frozen bag that you see at Costco is no different than these that are sitting fresh looking in a seafood market. So just kind of keep that in mind as well.
They often have the abductor muscles already pulled off.
Oh, do they? Okay, great. Yeah, and I think I've seen at Costco, especially in the States, they're really big. They do these seafood road shows in the Costco in Phoenix, and I've bought diver scallops there. Now, diver scallops are a Baja diver caught, which means they actually have divers that go down individually and shuck and grab these scallops. They can be like the size of a tenderloin steak. They can be like that and like that. Now, they're really expensive, but they're delicious. And I've actually taken them, wrapped them in bacon or prosciutto, and served it just like a steak. I put it on my barbecue and grilled it and basically treated it like a steak. So yeah, absolutely. I would not. The diver cots are fantastic, and the East Coast. And there's a qualicum, a fresh qualicum scallop that's really nice, but they're really quite small. So I really, I like to find a little bit bigger of a scallop. So just out of comparison, this is a 1020, and this is what we call a U10. So that's kind of the size difference. However, there's quite a big price difference between that to that. So, and again, I have no problem searing these. They're easy to work with. You can get the bay scallops, which are literally the size of your thumb. Those are really hard to work with, other than thaw them, put them in the cream sauce, and poach them. So we are going to just lightly season these with a little bit of salt. By all means, if you want to put some pepper on them, you can. For me, it's more of a, I don't like the look of black pepper on a white fish, and I'm not a big fan of white pepper. So, but by all means, if you like white pepper, use it. I find white pepper has a really distinct flavor, and I really don't like it on scallops. I don't really like it in a lot of things. Oops. Now, a lot of people say, you know, tell me my sister is one of them, tells me that she doesn't like to cook with salt. And that's fine if you don't want to cook with salt. However, they're really bland without salt, unless you pack a lot of flavor, which there is a fair bit of flavor in that, but you need something. So just, like I said, go light on it, but make sure you season it with a little bit. Also, if you want to make beurre blanc, you can use vinegar. You can use a white wine vinegar if you want. It definitely has a little bit more punch to it. And I always, if it calls for a cup of white wine, I would do probably 3/4 of a cup of white wine vinegar and 1/4 cup of water, just to kind of cut it a bit. But again, it has definitely a strong acid flavor, but it'll work as well. All right, these are nice and hot. So while that's reducing, I got my burners on high, so I'm just going to remove my pans here for a minute, and we're going to make the gremolata. Now, what gremolata is a classic garnish actually for veal ossobuco or ossobuco milanese. It's parsley, garlic, and lemon zest. And it's literally just a fresh garnish to sprinkle on top of veal ossobuco over top of risotto. However, it's a great way to add really quick, fresh flavors to anything. And again, you can add whatever flavor you want. Classically, it's garlic, lemon, and parsley. I've taken fresh green peppercorns and chopped green peppercorns in it and put it over steak with garlic. You know, you can finely dice anchovy fillets and put it in there for punch on a Caesar salad. So really, it's, you know, again, whatever your imagination can come up with, by all means. So we just want to really finely chop the parsley. And again, I chop this all separately and then mix it. And again, make this ahead of time. Keep it in your fridge, keep it covered. It'll last for a good 6 to 8 hours. I wouldn't make it 2 days in advance because it starts to get a little mushy with the garlic in there. I'm not helping the heat factor in here with the burners on high. So there. Then we're going to crush our garlic. Really, it's however much garlic you want to put in there is up to you. And when I cut garlic, you'll probably see that I'm kind of squishing it more than chopping it. You can use a garlic press if you want. I really like to squish it to really get the oils out of the garlic. I find that garlic nowadays really doesn't have a lot of oil content in it. You can buy some really good organic garlic. And I think even Save On Foods. I live in Langley, like most of you, I'm sure. It's only been the last several years that you know, you can find some of these, you know, nicer products in your local grocery store. I remember 15 years ago, you could barely find cilantro at the grocery store. So, you know, I go to Save On Foods and I'm looking for lemongrass or something. Now they ask, did you find everything? No, never mind. I'll just look elsewhere. But they're getting better. So anyways, there's our white wine. As you can see, we're about half. Now what we're going to do is we're going to add our heavy cream. Now when I say heavy cream, it has to be whipping cream, which is 35 or 36 to 33%. 36% I think you can buy in the US, and I can buy it in the restaurant business, but 33 is kind of like the standard milk fat. And the reason why you want to use 33% minimum is it won't separate on you. If you try to add Cremo to this, it's going to turn to cottage cheese on you. So no, there's no skim milk option on this. When I cook this sauce, everybody's like, can I do it low fat? There's really not a lot of options. I would just sear the scallops and just serve it with a salsa or something like that, or serve it with the salad that I made on the previous dish. So yeah, you have to use a heavy cream on it. So we're gonna just let that come to a boil as well. In the meantime, so we have our parsley and our garlic, and now we're going to add a little bit of lemon zest. Now I'm just using a microplane of this. If you want to use a zester and then chop it by hand, or even a vegetable peeler, if you have a really sharp vegetable peeler, to get just the outer peel off it and then chop it. Microplanes is probably one of the handiest gadgets you can have in your kitchen, and it's great for hard Parmesan cheese, nutmeg, ginger, all citrus fruit. And now we're just going to combine this all. Turn my burner down a bit because I'm starting to get really hot here. And then we're just going to literally just chop that up until it's well combined. Just get in there for a second. And then we'll just put that in a ramekin. Got a little bit of lemon zest here still bunched up. If you want to use, I've done cilantro and lime juice and a little bit of ginger like in Asian cooking, and you want to sprinkle that over top, you can do that as well. Right. So we're kind of waiting for the Beurre Blanc to be ready to incorporate the butter. I don't want to pre-sear the scallops and have them sit because they'll just keep cooking. And we're getting there fairly soon. Once the cream starts to boil, it doesn't take long. You do want to watch it. If you reduce it too much, it'll start to turn really yellow and it'll actually get really thick on you. Now when I sear the scallops, I like to use canola oil. And the reason why I like to use canola oil is mostly for the heat. If you use an olive oil, you can only get olive oil to a certain temperature and then it starts to get really bitter, which is what we call a flash point. So canola oil, you can get really hot and it won't go bitter on you, whereas olive oil has a tendency to go bitter. And when you watch me searing the scallops, I want a really, really hot pan. Go ahead.
What about grapeseed oil?
Yes, you can use grapeseed oil, peanut oil, canola oil, vegetable oils. They have a really high flash point, so you can use them for searing anything. So I pretty much do not use olive oil in many things other than something that doesn't require a lot of heat, or I use my olive oil just for finishing. Yes?
Can you use sunflower oil?
Yeah, sunflower oil, it works as well. I don't want a ton of oil. And because we have a fair bit of scallops, I don't want to overcrowd the pan, so I'm using 2 pans. It's really important when you do pan sear anything, chicken, steak, salmon, scallops, you don't want to crowd the pan. And again, you're better off to get this pan smoking hot, add your product, and then turn the heat down. If you start out too low, you're never going to get that heat up unless you have a 80,000 BTU flamethrower. You're never going to get this pan hot enough. And what will happen is you will then actually start to poach. So I don't know if any of you have cooked, chicken at home, even steak or scallops. If you end up with a lot of liquid in the pan, that is what should have been left in your scallops. The temperature was too low and it started to draw the moisture out and then it started to poach in it. So you really want to give it a really quick sear, both sides, till it's just nice and golden on each side and there's no liquid in it. I call it milk. When you're cooking scallops, you'll see that white milk. Hopefully if I do this right, you won't see any white milk in the pan. I'm kind of putting my money where my mouth is here. So I'm just gonna leave my pans on, get them nice and hot. We're almost there with the cream. You don't want to take this off too ahead of time and then start folding your butter in, because then it's gonna be really thin. You really do want this to be a bit thicker. Also, if you want, this dish is really universal. You can really serve this with anything as far as the Beurre Blanc. So, like I said, we serve it on scallop, we serve it on prawns. We fold in tons of parsley and garlic and do like a garlic pesto butter for our prawn dish at Joe Forte's. So really, it's whatever you can think about putting in this, I wouldn't be afraid. Lots of fresh dill is fantastic for salmon. You can poach the salmon and then serve the high-fat Beurre Blanc over top and you're kind of a little less fat. Yeah, exactly. You're balancing it out a bit. So with the butter that we're using for the Beurre Blanc as well, it's an unsalted. I really recommend using unsalted butter. If you use a salted butter, you have no control over the salt content. And if you put salted butter in here, your Beurre Blanc will be fairly salty. You can always add salt, but not with salted butter. It's gonna end up a little salty. Leave it at room temperature. Dice it, leave it at room temperature. If it's really ice cold going in there, it's going to cool this down so dramatically that it won't melt, because we will be taking this off the heat and then folding it into there. Also, the difference between salted and unsalted, salted butter obviously has more preservative value in it, so salted butter will last longer. Unsalted butter doesn't have a super long shelf life. So in your fridge it lasts okay, in your freezer it lasts longer, but you can't really leave unsalted butter on the counter. You really shouldn't leave any butter, but salted butter is somewhat more safe on the counter because it does have salt in it. So preservatives are sugar, salt, and vinegars. And that's kind of, preservatives in your food. So, anything that has a lot of sugar in it, like jams, will last months in your fridge because there's so much sugar in it, nothing will survive. Same with salt and same with vinegars. Or acid. And we're almost there. I'm not going to try to confuse things and sear at the same time, so we'll just kind of take those off. I know I'm turning it into a bit of a sauna in here. We're almost ready. So to that, we're also going to add a little bit of lemon juice to it. but we're gonna add the lemon juice once it's finished. If you add the lemon, you don't wanna put chunks of lemon in here because the peel will actually make it really bitter. And I know lemon is already bitter, but the pith actually has a really strange flavor. Everybody can see in the mirror all right? So we're almost there. I wonder if this is actually a little bit quicker. Oh, there we go. Now, if it's too fast, you want to make sure that it doesn't boil over. Again, that's why it's really important to have the right size pot for this. And if you're using a Cremo, like I said, you would never even get to this stage. You'd be looking at cottage cheese in there. And as it reduces, it's starting to turn a little bit more yellow on you. This is where gas is a little bit easier to work with. We're almost there. Mary, do you have a strainer handy and a bowl that we could strain this into? And I would say we are good. See how yellow that is now? Everybody can see in the mirror all right? And see how thick that is? So that was 2 cups when we started. A cup of white wine and a cup of cream. And now we've literally reduced it down to that. So now this is where the fun begins. Your butter. You want to whisk in your butter. This is what you call mounting, when you add butter to a sauce and you whisk it in. It's maybe a little too warm, the butter, but that's fine. Now, the reason why you do a Beurre Blanc, some people say, well, why don't you just melt butter? The thing is the wine and the cream is where you're getting so much of your flavor. And yes, you can fold in a lot of butter. And that's probably good right there. You do need to add a little bit of salt. Again, I try not to put pepper in it. Again, it's more of just a color thing, but if you want to put some peppercorns while you're boiling it, if you want the pepper flavor, by all means, and then we're straining it out anyways. I added the juice of half a lemon. By all means, you can add more. And that's it. So now you can see where this flavor of this sauce comes from when you have just about a half a pound of butter and 2 cups of liquid, and that's what we ended up with. I know, I hear it all the time, especially from my wife when I'm cooking at home. Do you really need to use all that butter? Anyways, so now we have our pan here. We're going to sear our scallops. Yes, exactly. She was the queen of butter. Make sure I turn off the right burner. So I am leaving this on high, and even still, I wish this was a little warmer still. And I always tell people, you know what? If you have a side burner on your barbecue, do this on your side burner, because it does splatter a lot. Yeah, this pan is not quite as warm as I would like it to be, but this one's kind of a hotter burner, so I might try to juggle them back and forth a bit. You know, when you're searing, don't get tempted to kind of start playing with it. Let it sear, let it do its thing. It's the same when you barbecue at home. You know, you put it on, then you start flipping it around. Let it get that really nice crust on there. And scallops should be, I prefer medium rare, no more than medium. They should not be totally white and chalky throughout. They should have a thin or thick layer of opaqueness inside. Now when you're searing prawns, which we're doing later in a sauce, you don't need to worry about searing them like scallops. Prawns don't have a lot of moisture in them, so you don't lose a lot of moisture. But scallops have a ton of moisture. And I would do the same thing with halibut. Super hot pan. See that nice color on the outside? That's what you're looking for. I don't have a ton of oil. You see it's not swimming in oil. I'm gonna move this around because this burner is definitely warmer. Oh, we're actually not bad. At the restaurant, we serve about 4 of these, 5 of them for an entree. As an appetizer, 2 is lots. I don't know if you're like me, I find scallops really rich. So I don't like to eat a lot of them. They're very, very rich. And a lot of people actually have a hard time stomaching scallops because they are so rich. You know, if there's one item that we get, you know, some phone calls on that people say, oh, I was at your restaurant last night and I was ill, a lot of it, you know, it's generally lots of wine and scallops. Generally the 2 don't mix, so maybe don't drink too much wine, no. But generally the 2 of them don't mix well because they are so rich. If you wanted to make a pasta dish and serve and put scallops, we do at the restaurant, we make a pasta dish and we still pan-sear them and then we just crown it on top of the pasta.
What about cooking them with a mixture of a little bit of butter in with the oil?
You can. Again, it's still, because we're finishing it with a very rich butter sauce, you don't really need to. But now if you wanted to, you could literally, when they're done, you know, spoon a little bit of butter in there and add a little bit of white wine if you want. If you don't want to go through the process of this, you could and then finish it off with a good handful of parsley. But just keep in mind that this pan is really hot. Any brown bits, you know, will tend to get into the sauce and things like that. So, and if you go and add liquid to this, while they're nice and seared, it's not so bad, but if they're not quite seared, then you're now poaching them like the salmon we did. So I would just recommend taking them off the heat, letting them drain, add a little bit of white wine to the pan, and then you know, let that reduce, and then just fold in a little butter and be done. Again, I'm just feeling for a texture thing. Everybody's all right with them being medium rare? Or do you like, okay. My father hates mid-rare scallops, so. Yeah, he's not here, exactly. Yeah, doesn't like mid-rare scallops. And I have not turned the heat down at all on these. As you can see, I just left it. This one's starting to get a little dry. You could add a little oil, but you know, I've got the sear on there already, so I'm not overly concerned. And I put my money where my mouth is, there's no milk in the bottom of the pan, and that's really important. And like I said, that really goes with anything. If you're searing halibut or salmon, you want the pan to be dry, just the oil you started with, and that's really about it. It also helps to have, you know, a fairly heavy bottom saucepan as well.
Is that a non-stick pan?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. I would not take your $300 all-clad pan and get it to a smoking point. I have, or had, $300 all-clads that I basically ruined. As a chef, we like to cook everything on high heat. I would use a cast iron or a pan that is maybe got a little bit of age on it and you don't care. So you really want to make sure that you're not using a really, really expensive pan. And a stainless, like a stainless steel pan would work fine. It doesn't have to be non-stick. As long as you get this oil hot enough, you'll be fine. Okay, I think we're pretty much ready to go. So you can see both sides, I have really nice and golden brown. If I go to a restaurant and I order scallops, if they don't come out looking like this, then they're not really done properly. So it is really important. And I think people think that scallops are supposed to be like opaque and this white color, but no, they're supposed to have a nice golden brown crust on them. If you want to go ahead and spoon, oh here, I'll show you one here. So then what we're going to, do you have a bigger spoon? Oh, right there. There we go. So we're just going to literally spoon the Beurre Blanc on top, and then we're going to finish it with a little bit of the Gremolata. And that's it. And because the scallops are really inconsistent sizing, you know, you will want to, you know, kind of take them out as you, this one here gets 2, because this one was the smaller ones. How many people do we have? 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And then there's extra ones here. This one's a little bit smaller, so maybe save that. I think I got 2 or 3 extra. Now I had this pan, this plate to the side with a little bit of paper towel, just in case they were still quite oily, but they were nice and dry, so I didn't bother putting it on here. But if you find that they're quite still oily or whatever, then put them on the absorbent towel, because like I said, we are adding a fair bit of butter to that yet. You like those? Thanks. I would not eat Beurre Blanc every meal of the week. Once a month, I think it's a nice treat. You know, people always say to me, how do you get food tasting so well? There's no secret. It's butter, it's cream, and it's salt.
But there's not much on the plate.
No, there's not. Like I said, you know, realistically, if you took this pan and then put, you know, a couple big chunks of butter in there, you're getting just as much butter. The nice thing is you're reducing it and you're just intensifying those flavors. I really like this, like I said, and finishing it with a little bit of soy and a little bit of wasabi paste, and it makes a fantastic soy wasabi butter. If you want to barbecue scallops, you can as well. Again, you want to use big ones, obviously, and you want to get your barbecue super hot. You know, make sure you oil them really well, and then just quickly on the barbecue, a couple minutes on each side at most.